Hello, everyone. Hi out
Hi.
there. Welcome to the Musical QuaranStream with Glen and Bree. I am Glen,
And I'm Bree.
and here we are for our twice weekly stream where we talk about musicals and theater and the arts. And pitch an idea where we're like, hey, would anybody else out there like to hire us to turn into a musical? Because we're available.
You can do it.
Yes.
I'm also very intelligent because I just figured out I can do a mean hokey pokey with this setup.
Yes, she can. I was trying to think of what we could say that we had watched in the arts this week on the computer, and that was pretty much it. Her doing the hokey pokey was the single greatest work of art I've ever seen, and unfortunately it was not recorded. So
Yes, but send me your bored toddlers. I will do everything in and out of the camera.
yeah,
Because I can put my whole head in. I can put my whole head out. I can put my whole head in. And I can shake it all about.
And if you are at home still looking for like live entertainment sort of thing, the National Theater is still posting up their plays. The Globe, Shakespeare's Globe, has some of their plays available online for people to watch.
We've been watching Studio Ghibli we haven't seen.
Yes, Studio Ghibli, which is on HBO Max, has Studio Ghibli. We've been, oh, hi there, Bristol is here. We have been complaining to anybody who will listen to us loudly about everybody just stop making your own streaming service.
We only, we had a furlough. We only have so much money.
Yes.
We tried to watch some Central Park, which was created by the creator of Bob's Burgers. Has a lot of like Broadway people in it. And we watched the first 2 episodes and and I like it. No, I want to watch more of it, but it's not that Apple TV Plus is a bad price. It's just like when you're paying for everything else, and then it's like one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. So it's getting to a point of like I want to see everything. But it's almost as if I think my complaint in the past was I want to buy the channels I want to buy, right?
Yeah.
And now that we kind of have that going on, now I'm like, I want to buy the TV shows I want to buy. And it's just because like there's so many things. Like I think probably next time I have a little bit of extra cash, I'm gonna get Things We Do in Shadows season 2, and I'm gonna get Central Park.
And it is, it's a wonderful time for television entertainment because there's a lot of money being thrown at these shows right now, and you're getting to see things that ordinarily you wouldn't get to see. I mean, I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes of Central Park as well. Central Park, like Bree mentioned, is by the team that made Bob's Burgers. And I was like, this is a really weird show to watch because it's a cartoon, it's a musical, it's a funny musical that's more adult-oriented and everything like that, but where adult-oriented cartoons tend to be very hectic and very loud and brash and edgy, Central Park is actually very gentle,
soft, and
and it's like there's a sort of like smoothness to it that is even Bob's Burgers, which is a very good show and very inclusive and very loving, is not as gentle as Central Park is, but it is at the same time. All of this money being thrown around is being thrown around by companies that are essentially trying to cut each other's throats and take over the streaming market. So
yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that we're really happy with as people who like going into theater and performers and entertainers is it definitely seems like there have been more opportunities for creators at this point. But also I feel like, you kind of already had to have like a pretty good support system or a pretty good plan or a pretty good team in order to kind of keep going. Because I think like as this keeps going on, we have seen people who were supported maybe initially, where almost everybody, so like teachers and restaurateurs and everybody else are now really, really suffering. And it's just sad.
Yeah.
But I think that, be it that so many people have turned to the arts, have turned to entertainment during this time, really solidifies, I think, a lot of our choices to be storytellers and communicate with other people, but there's still going to be a really hard road to go for people who are just entering that field or people who entered the field last year. So I feel like, you know, if you were already kind of like up there and pretty privileged, you're doing just fine because we all know who you are and we're seeking you out, you know. But I think that there's a lot of talent out there that is going to have a harder time entering the game and having us know who they are, despite having, you know, TikTok and Twitter and everything. It's still hard to like really hone in on somebody's talent. And so I hope that there's kind of like systems in place that, you know, you can kind of keep going through the pipeline, because one of my major complaints in 2008 is there was a lot of stoppage there as well because of financial uncertainty. So there's probably people like, you know, I hate to make it all about me, but there's probably people like us where I think we would have been further along in our careers if people would have just like retired in 2008, if there would have been more kind of like moving things through the pipeline. And I think that this is going to be another type of experience that, you know, the generation after us is going to have to contend with.
Yeah. Well, I saw somebody on Reddit in one of the theater groups posted up a question that kind of made me a little bit sad, because it was the person who posted it is a young playwright who's like in a college program and said their question was, is the pandemic killing anybody else's passion for theater? And the story he told was basically, like I said, he's a young playwright. And he says, you know, while the Zoom performances and things like that are the best that we can manage right now and everything like that, it's really killing his passion for theater, because he loves the live performance and everything like that. He loves the communal experience. And a festival that he was going to submit to just announced they were doing it as a Zoom theater festival. And he's like, I just can't get into this. And it's like, I feel bad about that, because I'm like, yeah, it's very difficult right now. But at the same time, you've got to be able to say, we need this right now. We need the ability to say, hey, the theaters are not open. It's like that. That's an important part of it. We can't all be Disney opening up and letting people in and being like, well, you know, we had to because money.
Well, I want to add two things to that because, number one, I think a lot of people have said the same thing about movies. Even though movies are not really that same type of theatrical experience, still being in a movie with other people on opening day and stuff like that, people are very sad about the, kind of the movie industry and like how that's been affecting them. Two, I think it's perfectly okay to say, hey, we're going to be creative and try to create this new form of theater and also mourn what theater has been as well. I think that that's a perfectly valid feeling. And I really feel like along the lines of like, what can things be? As you mentioned Disney, and I think we had a really great conversation this morning of, you know, Disney's opening back up. It's kind of been mixed reviews. I think some people said, hey, you know, they posted signs, they're doing the best they can. And other people saying that people aren't social distancing. It's really problematic. And we thought, how fun would it have been if you were the Disney Imagineer to sit there and create queuing lines that were social distancing, and it's like, hop from magic cobblestone to magic cobblestone, go from magic flower to magic flower, go from magic iceberg to magic iceberg, and like have all these fun little themed lines and like make it a game and make it really entertaining. And like maybe you meet a Disney princess and like we said, Cinderella would be like, I made my very own mask, and you know, maybe, you know, Elsa would have like a really shiny one. And we thought, you know, wouldn't have that been a really fun take on making the best out of a bad situation and kind of like leading people to proper social distancing behaviors and trying to like make the world a real better place? And apparently Disney didn't think of that or do that, and that kind of made me sad as somebody who loves to be an entertainer, loves to create entertaining experiences, and I'm thinking about this type of stuff. I'm like, Disney could have hired me. I was like, I'll be an Imagineer. I'll do it.
Well, and Disney, you know,
tweeted me. I'll make cute little like rose mask for Belle. I'll do it.
As Bree said, Disney did do a lot of things trying to do it, but I feel like where it looks like they've fallen down from what we've seen is they've fallen down on making it a part of the theme of the park. And that's very important for Disney. That's why it's a theme park. That's why they invented the modern theme park with Disney, is that it's not supposed to just be stand in a line to go on a roller coaster. The line is supposed to be a part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got social distancing, if you've got safety measures you need to take on, they should be themed. And the thing that bothered me and that kind of started us on this conversation was seeing video of the character performers, the costume performers, coming down a runway and waving at the crowd and everything. And none of the princesses are masked because they're not allowed to wear masks, because Disney doesn't want kids complaining about, I didn't really get to see Cinderella, I didn't really get to see Snow White. And I was like, but you have costume designers, you have money, you had lots of time. You could have made themed masks. You could have made...
like, have cute little life lesson stories. Like
Yeah.
I said, like, you can have Tiana like, well, honey, I own a business, and I'm not going to let my employees not be masked. We got to keep each other safe. Or Mulan being like, oh, yes, all of us in the barracks were there to protect each other, not only on the battlefield, but with this virus. And just thought it would have been so cute to have, like, them really be role models that little kids
or
would
even
aspire to be and be excited about wearing a mask.
Or even just a character-appropriate thing of Merida being like, you know, and my face gets less windburned when I'm riding the horse, you know, sort of thing.
My family's tartan.
Yes, you know. It's just...
Or, like little bear fuzzy straps, like the little bear fur straps. That would be cute.
Yeah.
It would have been adorable. What I'm saying is, Disney, you should hire me. I have a million good ideas, and I'm very enthusiastic about them, and I can convince anybody to do anything. And this is my Twitter handle.
Yes. And
it's not too late to do the right thing.
And it is one of those things where I know there are people out there who would respond to any of this by being like, well, it's not Disney's responsibility to do that. It's like, well, it's got to be somebody's responsibility.
Right, and Disney owns the whole world. So if, like, you know, our government's not going to, why not Disney?
Yeah.
Come on.
If the government is not going to teach people how to properly wear masks and stay 6 feet apart, Disney at least can take a crack at teaching people.
Then maybe I think more people would buy into the benign oligarchy.
Yes, yes.
We don't trust you right now, but we could.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, if people start buying who are season ticket pass holders, I realize you have their money now, but who are you going to get next year?
So far, I have only seen one guillotine built. There is still time.
And it's not, I mean, like, I know that the assumption would be it's, like, right behind on the other side of this computer screen, but it's not here.
It is not here.
We have cats. No. Come on.
Yes. You cannot have cats and guillotines in the same room. Just
I
not
mean, they're
not
basically mini guillotines.
Yes. So anyway, let's see. What else?
Welcome.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we don't have much to talk about in the entertainment side of things. You know, I've been going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's actually coming to visit in a few weeks because we're trying to get our apartment finally set up, and we still have a lot of like boxes and stuff. So Glen's been working on that. Glen's been working on a sourdough starter. So I feel like we've been kind of getting busier than ever, and I don't know. I feel like sometimes I regret my choices at the beginning of quarantine. Like, I should have done more. But we were all dealing with existential crises, and still are, and still mask up, still wash our hands.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to remember is that working from home during a quarantine, during stay-at-home orders in a pandemic, is not the same thing as just working from home.
Yes.
There's a ton of stress. There's a ton of really bad stuff going on. And you are dealing with all of that in addition to having to continue to work.
Yeah, and I don't know about everybody, but I feel like my brain panicked kind of back in March. And, you know, you're doing the best you can. You're trying to make it through. And then kind of going on furlough and having a lot of, like, really kind of awkward things happening closer to, like, you know, May and June. It was a lot of trauma and experience to go through. So now I finally feel like, now that I'm back to kind of a more normal work schedule and I'm actually doing things, like I was like, I got to do some programming, my Excel spreadsheets, you know I love that. Been able to see some of my patients, even though I haven't been able to take their blood or anything because, like, I'm not a healthcare provider, I'm just a researcher. Getting to see some of my coworkers and talk with them, even though we're all 6 feet away and wearing masks. So I just feel like for me, having the little pieces of normalcy I can grab onto has helped me, like, feel more confident and feel more strong going forward, despite really kind of the fairly bleak national news that's still going on. I know I'm a little bit concerned because I work in a university hospital, and I think that they said all the university students are coming back on like August 17th. I don't know about all that, but
Yeah.
we're just gonna have to play it by ear and figure it out. But I think that that's the one next thing that's gonna probably stress me out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, and we'll just keep doing the musical QuaranStream to be a little ray of light.
Yes. It is a stressful time, and not naming names or anything, but there are people out there in the world who seem determined to make it as stressful as humanly possible. And you just you gotta keep going on, and you gotta keep thinking that there's always the possibility that you get through this and things are all right. And I feel like that's the
or
thing.
You get through it and it's not, but you need to be able to be there to make it all right.
Yeah, but it's still a possibility. You get through it and it's all right.
That's true.
You got to bear that possibility in mind.
I'm not the person making it more stressful, right?
No, you're not.
Oh, good.
No. And like last I checked, you aren't currently living in the White House, so.
Last I checked, so I'm not.
No, so. You live in a White House, not the White House. So.
I have a white cat, which I think is more important.
Yes. I mean, that just makes you a Bond villain. Bond villains don't make the world more stressful, they just blow it up.
So at the beginning of quarantine, this is like a nice segue, even though it doesn't seem like it right now. I was going to write Dr. Horrible 2. I wrote like a whole big bunch of it, and I still really want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But crises happened. I didn't have the energy to do it. But maybe we will do it because we've moved. Mm-hmm. I think we could do it.
So
I just want to be Dr. Horrible. I want to rule the world just so I can fix it.
The world is a mess, and you just want to rule it.
That's it.
Yeah.
People are like, that sounds like a lot of stress, and I'm like, yeah, but if I could just control everything, it wouldn't be.
It's like it's like that is the Bond villain thing. The like. Okay, Bond villains fall into a lot of different categories. But you do have the ones who are just like, no, you don't understand. I know what's best for everyone. Just put me in charge.
Yeah.
And then you have the ones who are like, I'm going to make all of the gold in the world radioactive so that only my gold can be spent. Like, that's not going to be a dead giveaway or anything when you show up with the only stockpile of non-radioactive gold. I'm getting way off topic here.
What we're saying is, well, you know what, actually, in another little tangent, I've been listening to NPR Throughline, and I've really, really loved it, and I've been posting about it, so if you have been following me on my Twitter handle here, I've been posting about it, especially, like, they had one on the American police system, which is really neat, and then I think I posted one about masks, where I didn't know, like, where the mask we're wearing now to save us from COVID-19 was created by, like, a Malay doctor at the turn of the last century, and there was this really fun, it's not a fun story, like, these are real people's lives, but from a theatrical perspective, it was a fun story. So the Malay doctor, now he's brilliant, went to Cambridge, studied, went all over the world, and said, hey, I think this is like pneumatic plague. I think this is bad. So like, let's all just like make sure that we keep our distance and like don't really kind of fuss with stuff. So this French doctor came over and he's like, whatever, like I'm Western medicine, blah, 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 herp, derp, derp. And like goes and breathes all over people and dies. Whereas like the Malay doctor, he was like, yeah, I wore a mask and I lived. And the only piece of evidence we really have about this is like the Malay doctor's Dr. Wu, his autobiography. And so they're like, so of course he's like painting himself as a hero, but it's like, but he also wore a mask and lived.
Like wearing the mask enabled him to be the guy who actually wrote the history.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was great. And then I listened to one about how American jingoism started, which was really neat because they said if you listen to any music created before the 1900s, there's no mention of America. Because they were supposed to be like, we are not Americans, we are the United States, right? And so they said, if you played our national anthem and you weren't familiar with it, you would not know it was for the United States of America because we never mentioned United States or America in it.
Okay.
And I thought that was so fair.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, really? And then I like was like, oh yeah. And then it wasn't until we started acquiring things like Hawaii and Guam and Alaska and all this stuff that they said, no, we're not the United States, because we had all these other territories, right? We're America. And so, like, they had all these history books of, like, British people being really frustrated with us. Like, well, first we tried to call them America, and then they're like, no, we're not. And now we're trying to call them United States, they're like, no, we're not. And they said that all happened. And so any music created after that point is all about America the Beautiful, you know, all that type of stuff, where America was really pushed heavy into propaganda. And I was like, music and national identity. Yep. I love anything about music, hence the Musical QuaranStream. So if you have a chance to check out Throughline, highly, highly recommend it. You go to like npr.com/podcast. I love it. It's all about history, and they kind of go on like these like wild different takes on history, but it's so important. It's so amazing. The saddest one I listened to was about at the beginning of quarantine. They had a guest on that's like, but maybe this national tragedy will bring Americans together and we'll all get through it. And it was like on like March 26th, and I was like listening to it now, and I'm like, oh no. They had so much confidence in us.
Oh, sweet summer child.
It's very sad.
Well, you guys may have noticed me looking over here and everything. I was trying to find a name that a day or two ago I came across. Somebody was up posting on Twitter these old turn-of-the-century cartoons, comic strips.
Oh, yeah.
The outbursts of Everett True.
Yes, I saw those.
And I had to look it up, which Everett True is my new, like, problematic fave. Problematic because he didn't start out as, like, fighting for justice and people's freedom and everything like that. He genuinely started out as he was the crank who would scream at little kids playing piano at a recital sort of thing. But they had a bunch of the later Everett True comics, and they were a lot of fun. Because Everett True was basically this sort of round-shaped gentleman in a bowler hat and a suit.
Like Ed Asner.
Yes. And much like Ed Asner, his entire joke was screaming and beating up people who were not doing right. So, like, the first strip someone posted was, there's Everett True walking down the street, and someone coming the other way. They're just 2 panels long, most of them. Someone coming the other way is, like, sneezing openly into the air without covering their face or anything. And the second frame is just Everett True sitting on top of this guy, pinning him to the ground, and shouting at a kid who's passing by, "Get me the Department of Health! I found one of these open sneezing flu spreaders!" And I was like, I want to do that. I just...
Do you want to draw comics, or you want to sit on people?
Like, see someone out who's not wearing a mask, and you just wrestle them to the ground and go, "Get me the Department of Health!" You know? But it's, that was a very nice little bit of, like, release of seeing those old comic strips. And partially it's sad because you're like, oh, there's still a whole lot of these problems going on. Yeah. But it's also kind of, it's fun to see that in the past there was someone there who was like, yeah, we can speak openly about how terrible these things are, and someone needs to be, like, clocked over the head to fix it. But
and without further ado...
Speaking of being clocked over the head.
Head injuries!
Head injuries, yes. We're in the middle of...
mental health. Brain health.
A mental health segment of our show. And we just covered the dreams, the history of dream interpretation, and everything like that. And so I thought that I would get a subject that is near and dear to me, that I admittedly do not know that much about, but I would like to learn more about, and if someone paid me to write a show, I would definitely spend a lot of time learning more about head injuries, specifically brain injuries. Because, and here is why this topic is near and dear to me. Do you know how many brain injuries it takes to get put on Virginia's registry of brain injuries?
What?
2. I know this because I am on the register of brain injuries in Virginia.
Uh-oh.
Because I suffered a minor brain injury. The doctor thinks I suffered a minor brain injury. once during a class
Mhm.
in college, and then I suffered a second brain injury shortly after I graduated from college. I was trying to teach an actor how to do a safe fall backwards, and I did a real fall backwards and actually lost consciousness very briefly.
Oh gosh.
So, and this wound up with me being placed on, like I said, the brain injury registry, which is a registry of everyone in Virginia who has ever had a brain injury, so that basically doctors can look on and see if you are in there. So if you go in for treatment for something, they can look you up and say, hey, you've been hit in the head a lot.
Twice at least.
Yes, twice at least. And this is a thing that I was told by the doctor who put me on the registry. That in retrospect, I'm like, well, I never did the research to check into this or anything like that, because he's the doctor. But the way he told me also made it sound like, I'm scolding you so you don't take these chances again. Was that he said the problem with a brain injury is that it can cause cognitive difficulty and everything. But you do not necessarily get those symptoms right up front when the injury happens.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you can go along for years functioning perfectly normal, and then one day the effects just hit. So that has been something that ever since that happened, I've had sort of like in the back of my mind at all times, is like, so is there going to come a day when, like, I'm not able to form a full sentence again?
Mm.
Is there going to come a day when I'm not going to be able to use a pencil or a pen or something like that? And it's a very disturbing thought to constantly have in your head. And it's not something, I think, that is told to you unless they are getting ready to put you on the brain injury registry.
Mm.
And I think that we don't pay that much attention to just the idea of what a brain injury is, what it means, what it can possibly cause.
Have you ever heard of, I think there was a movie about it a while
Mhm.
ago that Will Smith starred in,
Yes.
where it was the Pittsburgh doctor
Mhm.
talking about CTE and how
Yeah.
the NFL was like, no, there's no such thing. And
Yeah. Which, see, CTE is a thing that now is being acknowledged.
Mhm.
For years, like Bree said, the NFL did not want people acknowledging CTE as a thing where it's like, it's chronic. The C in there is chronic.
Mhm.
So it's being in a situation where you are constantly having
So
damage
football
done to the
players.
brain. Yeah. Football players.
Professional football players who
Yeah.
get paid to smack their heads and stuff.
Yeah, they are paid to run headfirst into other people, and they are paid to be thrown to the ground constantly in situations where your head might bounce off of the ground a little bit.
But I think like another one is like combat soldiers.
Yeah, combat
know?
soldiers. Boxers, of course, have trouble with CTE. It's come up recently that professional wrestlers. There have been a few professional wrestlers who have died in the past few years, where when they were examined after death, they found advanced CTE.
Mhm.
Some of them not people who exhibited what people think of as the symptoms of CTE,
Mm-hmm.
but they exhibited things like lowered inhibition. And that's I forget what it was we were talking about specifically recently, where it was like lack of inhibitions. Oh, it's a symptom of what's going around now.
COVID, yeah.
It's a potential symptom of COVID. Is if the virus settles in your brain, it can cause loss of inhibition. And I was like, it's funny that we have so much in our culture that is designed to teach people, oh, you should just let loose. You should just, free yourself from inhibitions and everything like that. And it's like, no, you should learn to be less of an inhibited person, but actual loss of inhibitions is a very, very bad thing, because that's the stuff that keeps you from, like, throwing yourself in front of a car when you see it coming your direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like everybody kind of has those thoughts where
Mhm.
you're just like, wow, that oven sure is hot. You know, and you think, well, I don't know what would happen if I touched it, but like, well, no, like, oh, that's not great.
Yeah.
So people who really have that issue,
Mhm.
you know, they know it's hot, but they kind of can't help themselves but touching it.
Yeah. And see, if you think about it, and I'm not talking about having a condition or a psychological thing where you have constant thoughts of self-harm or anything like that, but the vast majority of people have some form of intrusive thought, which is just like Bree said, it's the thought of like, what if I put my hand on that hot stove? It's not a thing that is genuinely a cause for concern that you are thinking it, unless your inhibitions are removed.
Well, and in like a much like gentler sense, I guess.
Yeah.
You're standing in line at a drugstore or something, and you're like, I'd really like to hug that person in front of me. They seem like they have a bad day, and so you go hug them. You know, that's not horrible, but like that person's gonna be surprised. They're gonna not really enjoy that hug.
Yeah, I mean, if you put it into a movie, it would be like a manic pixie dream girl moment. But if you put that into real life, that would be horrifying for the person suddenly receiving the hug.
Yeah, you just think of like little kids.
Yeah.
Like, Mom, why is that guy so fat?
Mhm.
That type of stuff.
Yeah. Again, another post on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
This one I actually got from a Twitter account that posts screenshots of like horrible questions asked on Reddit, where this guy was like, "Oh, I'm an Uber Eats delivery driver," and he said, "I delivered food a couple of days ago to this girl who was really cute, and I felt like our interaction was more than just a standard delivery interaction. And so I haven't been able to find any information about her, but I was thinking about just leaving a letter on her doorstep about, hey, I think you're really cute. I don't want to disturb you. But, you know, if you're interested, here's my phone number. You can call me." Would that be creepy? Yes. Yes, it would. And thankfully, like a few minutes later, apparently, he came back and replied. He's like, "Thank you for all of your responses. I am 100% not doing this." He's like, "You guys have pointed out to me that there's like maybe a 0.0000001% chance this would actually work out. And that is definitely not worth ruining somebody else's day." And I feel like that's what, you know, the random hug in line is there's a 0.00001% chance that the person you're going to hug is going to be like, "How did you know I needed a hug at this moment more than I needed anything else? But the rest of the time you are just causing undue stress."
Yep.
Yeah. So these are all things that come together in my mind when I think of a brain injury. That you have the sort of concept of, I do not know if things are all right or not. Never really being able to say, are things all right or are they not?
Well, and we talked about this, like one of the things of why I love neuroscience is the majority of our experience is through kind of a interpreter, right?
Yeah.
Because our brain is the thing that is interpreting our experience, but our brain can't be in the world. Our brain has to kind of pilot this fleshy, meaty, skeleton-y mech around. And so we really trust at the things we see, the things we taste. Like, we utilize our senses, we utilize our bodies, but we never have a pure experience of the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's like as long as our bodies are in between what our brains can interpret, there's never going to be a brain that can really kind of experience what we need to experience. It's always through like a veil.
Yeah.
And so I think on the one hand, that's kind of neat. On the other hand, it sometimes is very scary when you're dealing with mental health because so much of your world is built by the brain. And so you can't necessarily have a truth check. You can't say like, well, what would it be like to not live in my brain and have kind of an alternate thought to that? We have great imaginations and we can use that, but like, currently one of the things I'm working on is I lean very negative as an initial reaction. So one of the things that I'm trying to practice is, okay, I've already thought of the worst case scenario. Now let's think of a neutral scenario, and now let's think of the best case scenario. Just so that my brain can start interpreting, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and the way that I think is probably not correct. It's good to remember there's a worst case scenario, but it's also really important to remember, like, but this really awesome thing could happen too.
Yeah. Like we were talking about earlier, you've got to think that there's a possibility you can get through this and things will be all right.
Yeah.
So what I really want to do, if I'm working on a show about a musical about brain injury, which in talking about it, and there might be other people out there, you could drop into the comments and let us know if you're watching us on YouTube. I could not think of a musical that had really dealt with the subject of brain injury. And the closest I could get to it was, there's a musical called A New Brain, which is about someone suffering from brain cancer who has to have a cancerous tumor removed from his brain. But aside from that one, I couldn't think of something that was a play about what it is to have a concussion, a play about what it is to have CTE or something like that. And there's an important thing that I think needs to be brought out here at this point in the conversation, because we've talked a lot about the bad things that can happen because of a brain injury. Sometimes brain injuries, in particular severe brain injuries, can cause things like we talked about with the loss of inhibition. Sometimes they can cause people to become more violent, that sort of thing. There are also plenty of people out there who have negative effects from a major brain injury who do not have the issue of losing inhibitions, who do not have the issue of becoming more and more violent. Muhammad Ali is a great example of that he suffered greatly in his later life because of the brain injuries he sustained in his career. But he was an ambassador for peace, and he was an inspirational figure. And that's, I think, part of the frightening part of brain injury is you don't know what is going to happen. I
would also say another really, now I'm not going to go say, like, go bang your head on a frying
No,
pan.
no.
But one of the coolest things about brain injuries is sometimes you have spontaneous genius.
Yes.
Where you can do math problems really well, or you can play the 15 instruments.
Like,
it's not an aspirational thing, but there's
no.
plenty of documented cases where somebody had a horrific car crash and then they woke up and they can play the piano and the drums and the,
Some brain injuries have been known to cause synesthesia, which is a thing that I always thought was kind of cool, where you have essentially your sensory interpretations get crossed, so that you're able to see sound or hear taste, sort of thing, which sounds like a superpower. I'm not going to go intentionally injure my brain in order to get it.
Yeah, and neither of us are physicians. We don't work in clinical psychology. We don't work in neuroscience. We do have a lot of experience because I've worked in that field in the past, but, if you would like to learn more, or if you feel that anything that we're saying is ringing true personally to you, please go talk to your primary care physician.
Yes.
Please go find a medical professional in your locality. We'd love to talk with you more about it, but don't ask us questions. We can't diagnose you, cure you, or anything like that.
We are not capable. We are not authorized, capable, certified, whatever you want to say, to give advice on the subject. That's what it comes down to.
We just like to create musicals.
Yes, we're talking about this in the most theoretical terms as like an exercise in creating a show about a subject. And I feel that what I would be really interested in seeing done is, like I talked about with the Flash Boys, journalistic musical theater. Because what I have seen, the little bit of research that I've done into the subject of brain injuries, is that there's just a lot that we don't understand about the brain. There are a lot of things we do understand. We understand that damage to the temporal lobe can cause visions and that sort of thing.
Would Phineas Gage be a character?
I do not know. But see, I was thinking that it would be an interesting thing to essentially put together, like, say, because there is no specific tragedy to hone in on, it's just trying to understand the condition more, to take the structure of something like, say, the Laramie Project, which genuinely is a play that was cobbled together from conducted interviews, and creates this entire play, and turn that structure into a musical about researching a topic. So, all right, my last thing that I'm going to compare it to that not everybody may possibly have like seen or heard or in. I want to do a John Ronson book, but as a musical. John Ronson, for those of you who don't know, she knows John Ronson.
The Psychopath Test.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of John Ronson. He wrote The Psychopath Test. He wrote The End of August, The Butterfly Effect. The Men Who Stare at Goats is one of his, isn't it? Where he researches these topics, and he genuinely researches them as, I am a curious person who wants to understand the world. I believe it's in The End of August, he says, or no, it's in The Butterfly Effect, which was his examination of the changes in the adult entertainment industry. He describes seeing an adult film star reacted to with disgust by a desk clerk at a hotel. And he said that threw him into wanting to research this topic and learn more about it, because he said in his experience, disgust breeds incuriosity, and incuriosity breeds misunderstanding. So he was like, he has basically devoted his career as a researcher and a writer to always being curious and always wanting to find out more. And so I feel like I would like to see attempting to take that lens on the world and apply it in the form of a musical. Now, what does that mean about how the music would sound or anything? I genuinely don't know. I don't know that this show would wind up having a specific sound. I think that it could potentially sound like the off-Broadway recording of the SpongeBob musical, where they were still putting together all these varying styles of music and everything. And it might even be a topic like that where you would want to go to multiple musicians and say, this is the information that is in this scene. If we hand you this, what song do you bring back to us for a character to actually perform in this moment? I think that this has a lot of potential as a subject that we don't know everything we can know about it, and the general public knows even less than that. To put together a show that is informative, that brings together the best knowledge we have on the subject right now, and to do it in a way that is entertaining and can communicate facts. And maybe make the audience interested in individual cases and individual people. I know that's not much of a pitch in terms of the plot. It's basically, hey, somebody, why don't you give me money to go interview people and turn it into a musical? But
I think like the option that I would probably go in, like I love this. I feel like it's actually very similar to like how I kind of created my Mania. But I feel like the option I would go with is either I think if we were playing a video game, right? I think the easy option would be somebody has a head injury, they become a musical genius, right?
Yeah.
And they now live their life completely musically. Because I feel like, for me, the reason why I'm really interested in music in the brain is music is one of the few things, like vocal music, that transverses hemispheres and transverses lobes. So when somebody has lost speech due to a stroke, they can somehow still sing. And that's really fascinating to me, right? So I feel like that would be kind of the easy game, you know? And I feel like you could create several things on this. The more harder version of this like video game style would be, I think, if you could take that concept of like how you said how they created SpongeBob and do it in a way where Like with My Mania, you interview people who have had traumatic brain injuries,
Mm-hmm.
talk about their experiences, maybe start developing things like how we used to do warm-ups and we would all sing and we'd create a song and stuff like that, because I feel like that might be something, trying to get people who have not experienced traumatic brain injury to an experience part.
Mm-hmm.
Might be some vocalizations, it might be some sound, it might be something like that, and do kind of like a Joe Iconis take on it, where he builds in the crashing of the waves or the call of the velociraptors or stuff like that, and utilize weird instruments like theremins and stuff like that in order to kind of create a feeling and an understanding. Also similar to how I did My Mania is I took PET scans and I used it as a light plot. So it's like showing where bipolar would light up in the brain. I think utilizing, PET tomography in that similar way, or maybe an experience of a CAT scan or an MRI or something like that, where maybe it's like it's covering and uncovering and whirring, and I don't know. I feel like you could do like I said, you could do the easy version, which is like, hey, there's this musical genius. He just kind of creates a very traditional musical. Or you could do the much more artsy fartsy, like, hey, we're going to put you through this experience and maybe the music won't make sense, but it's going to give you a feeling for somebody suffering, like, from the impact, and then recovering and going through, and then just saying like, yeah, but this is kind of open-ended. This is one person's journey, but this happens a lot of different ways, and we just wanted to give people who might not be able to understand it kind of a good way of like feeling an impact, going through treatment, seeing how things are sounding, and then kind of sending them out into the world. Yeah. And then there's a whole host of things in between that you could do. But that would be the two branches I would go down, as one, a very traditional narrator, very musically savvy, that type of stuff, versus much more of a site-specific, high interactivity, maybe a bit more artsy style as far as music, in order to convey feelings more so than a narrative storytelling line.
Yeah, and I think that is a fascinating idea to look into. Those are fascinating ideas to look into. I think that the thing that steers me away from the easy path that you said there is that there's a very bad history in the entertainment industry of associating a condition with genius or a condition with innocence or something like that. If you think of the popular culture over the years, the way that autism has been presented, autism has generally been presented in the entertainment industry as, oh, in that direction you find genius. So you know, whether you're talking about Rain Man, where he's, this mathematical genius who has difficulty communicating otherwise, or people who insist that Benedict Cumberbatch's version of Sherlock is autistic. It assigns, like we were talking about, oh, that sounds like a great superpower, but I'm not going to give myself a head injury for it. It assigns value to the condition that the condition does not inherently have. And I think that one of the things that I struggle with in terms of coming up with a plot line for it is I don't want a plot line that assigns power and value to the injury. At the same time, I don't want a plot line that says, if you get this kind of injury, your life is effectively over. Because the fact of the matter is that with a lot of conditions in this world, not just with brain injuries, but with a lot of conditions in this world, there's a wide array of human experience out there. There are
and most kind of go middling. Like I would say, most people who experience stuff, yes, it's kind of a thing that I went through, and it's not great, but I'm still live a rich, full life. Yeah. But there is also like best case scenario, and hooked up to machines.
Yeah, and I could see. What I could see as fictionalizing it is, instead of this head injury turned me into a musical genius, I could see the story beginning with a character who has a career already that has to do with their brain. It could be a musician, it could be a writer, it could be a journalist. You could even use a fictionalized version of John Ronson, since I'm such a huge fan of his work. But you could have a character who sustains a brain injury. And that moment of the doctor talking to them and being like, okay, so now you're basically telling me that I'm walking around with, like, one of those unexploded World War II bombs in my head. That maybe I'll live my entire life and never see anything happen from this, or maybe I'll wake up one day and be paralyzed from the neck down. And you can't tell me if it's going to be either way. And then that character's curiosity leading them out into a world where the music starts to reflect sort of the conditions that they worry might have happened. You know, am I still the writer that I was following my brain injury? Or am I still the musician that I was following my brain injury? You have someone being like, I hear this ringing in my ears. Was this ringing in my ears always there and I'm just noticing it now? Or was it the result of this thing? And that leading them into situations where they encounter all of the sort of myriad possibilities of what this means. And it could just be that, it could be that simple of a thing of, like, pick a thing that the character is doing. I would not pick this because it's the easiest choice, and it's a choice that gets made a billion times. But take a person who is the director of a show, who is putting up a professional theater show, and sustains this injury, and then you follow him through the process of continuing with his life, still doing his show, but just with that added doubt of what did this cause. And then interspersed with that in little scenes you can have material you put together from interviews with other people who have suffered brain trauma, with doctors who have studied it, neuroscientists who have worked in the field, that sort of thing, that the story becomes about still leading a normal life and essentially learning to lead a normal life with this concern in your mind, while still being able to communicate we talked to experts and we talked to people who have experienced it, and here's the information we can give you.
I think, I mean, like, I like that you kind of found, like, a nice middle ground between kind of my suggestions, which, like I said, there's a whole bunch of it.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that you're really going to struggle with is finding high drama.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think, like, that's the one thing where I said, like, the easy version is the easy version for a reason. It's kind of the Hamilton version, right? Catchy songs, real dynamic, you know, the voice is this thing, but it does leave a lot of, like, really ambiguous things that people are going to nitpick and say, were you a responsible writer, right?
Yeah.
This saying, like, you know, how does somebody, like, the traumatic event has already happened, right? How does somebody know that they're normal after this or lead a normal life after this? And I feel like most pieces of drama, you know, and for the most part, does not say, like, well, here's normal life. It's a unique event of something that happened that was so dramatic it had to be told as a story. Yeah. And so I think that trying to figure out how becoming normal after a trauma certainly has those experiences, because I feel like, you know, you would look at, like, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, or you know, even pieces like Streetcar, stuff like that, like back in, like, the modern era of theater, that has a bit more of the, like, yes, this is kind of a normal life and they're generic things, but, you know, it's talking about after kind of an initiating incident and how do you deal with that. Yeah. So cool. I have to go to the bathroom.
Oh my. Well, we have both been focusing on hydrating more in order to stay healthy.
It's summer.
I am ahead of schedule on my bottle here.
Yes, but we're very proud.
All right, so that sounds, though, like we need to wrap this up. And
well, I was going to say, I was like, as much as I love me some mental health. I love me some brain health. But you might have to entertain people for a couple minutes by yourself, or we could just end a little early.
Yeah, let's go ahead and end a little early, because I feel like we've hashed out as much of this show as we can hash out on
Yeah,
this stream.
just I mean, and that's the one thing where it's like I think it would depend on your producers. I think it
Yeah.
would depend on who gave you the buy-in. You know, whether it was a hospital or whether it was like the public theater.
Yeah.
You know, I think that would be really kind of like how it would be shaped, and like that's kind of the interesting thing about just I've never seen something like this, and I'd like to see something like this. Like you could easily come up with 20 different concepts.
Yeah.
And it would all
Absolutely.
be good and new and something that's not on stage right now.
Yeah, a finished product might start from where we just pitched it and wind up completely different from anything we just described.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we are going to go ahead and we're going to end this so that Brie can get where she needs to go. And we love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. It was wonderful being able to spend this time with you. Check out our Patreon and our Ko-Fi, or our Ko-Fi. We don't have a Patreon for the QuaranStream. Check out the Ko-Fi. And check out, our bookstore as well. We have our bookstore. It'll scroll by there in just a second.
With our books now, for the most
yes,
part.
Yes.
Hey.
So check all that out. Stay brain healthy. Yes, thank you. And we will see you guys next time. Yes, we'll see you next time. Until next time, take care of yourself because we're not there to take care of you. All right, run.
Bye.
Run.